I'm Elaine Reyes at the United Nations headquarters in New York. Join us as we delve into the world's most pressing issues and learn how the people inside work toward a better future for everyone around the world.
Coming up on UN Insider.
Our world is becoming unhinged.
Urgent calls for action as world leaders gather at the 78th UN General Assembly.
We cannot afford the same old broken record of scapegoating and waiting for others to move first.
Engaging with world powers and advocating for developing nations. China delivers a message of cooperation and inclusion.
Vice President of the People's Republic of China, and I invite him to address the Assembly.
Confronting inequality and striving for a more sustainable global future.
How often does a woman not have even the basic conditions with which to walk into a bank and be able to obtain a loan?
Next on UN Insider.
The United Nations General Assembly is one of the biggest diplomatic events in the world, and it's all happening here in New York City. Delegations from 193 member states gather to take on a laundry list of global issues from climate change and geopolitical conflicts to concerns about technology and an effort to save a key blueprint for sustainable development. Vice President Han Zhang is leading the Chinese delegation this year. Earlier this week, he met with the U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken in a bit of surprise diplomacy. He also met with UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres. On Thursday, he took the podium during the general debate session.
I have great pleasure in welcoming His Excellency Han Zhang, Vice President of the People's Republic of China, and I invite him to address the Assembly.
第二，坚持互利共赢，促进共同发展。
We should pursue mutual benefit, deliver win-win outcomes, and achieve development for all. Development should be placed at the center of the international agenda, and development benefits should reach every country and individual in a fairer way. China will continue to contribute building a global community of development. This year marks the 10th anniversary of the Belt and Road Initiative put forward by China. More than 3,000 cooperation projects have been launched under the framework of this initiative. The China-Europe Railway Express had 16,000 freight services in 2022, which fully demonstrates the vitality of the Belt and Road Initiative. Next month, China will host the third Belt and Road Forum for International Cooperation. We will further advance both Belt and Road cooperation and the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development.
Arshita Jha has been monitoring some of the other events of this high-level week. Dija.
Yes, Elaine. The general debate this year, as almost everyone predicted, is focusing on one thing, the Ukrainian conflict. No matter it's countries that condemned Russia for its so-called special military operation or those who took a softer tone, one thing is for sure, everyone is urging parties to end the war. The country that helped the UN to broke the Black Sea Initiative, the Green Deal, Turkey, its President Erdogan gave, I think, one of the most impressive lines in the UNGA speech. War will have no winners and peace will have no losers. This has been resonated by many world leaders during the general debate. The other thing that most mentioned here were two, the SDGs and the reform of the UN, particularly the Security Council. For SDGs, basically everyone agreed that now the fulfillment of SDGs 2030 agenda is almost impossible, but we still need to give it a try. Obviously, when talking about the SDGs, developed countries and developing countries had very different priorities. For example, President of Brazil, Lula da Silva, and Cuban President Diaz-Canel both put poverty elimination first. And as G77 plus China president, Cuban President Diaz-Canel also called for the reform of international financial institutions. As for the reform of the Security Council, now that is a huge issue. We can safely say that except for supporting African permanent member seat, almost no one have the same idea. Also, on 20th, Security Council held an open debate on Ukraine, and this highly expected meeting started with high drama.
As far as you repeated many times that the violation here is about President Zelensky speaking before the Council members, there is a solution for this if you agree. You stop the war and President Zelensky will not take the floor.
After the drama, President Zelensky gave the speech and laid out some details of his 10-point peace plan. For example, this plan insists Russia's retreat from all Ukraine territory. It also asks the UN to reform the Security Council. If one permanent member state of the Council invaded other member states, the permanent seat should be paused. For his part, Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov told the Council that Ukraine didn't honor the UN Charter, accusing Ukraine racism against its Russian groups in the East. Therefore, Russia is protecting people in East Ukraine. With a divided Security Council, this meeting is basically more like a showdown rather than a problem-solving gathering. Well, this actually went back to what some member states asked for, the reform of the Security Council. Later this week, Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov will also hold a press conference here in the United Nations, and we will have more on this issue. Elaine.
CGTN's Shudija, thanks. This week started with an urgent call to rescue the UN's Sustainable Development Goals, and the world responded, agreeing to recommit to the plan and its 2030 deadline. Jody Jacobs has more.
In 2015, world leaders adopted the Sustainable Development Goals with the hope of ending extreme poverty, ensuring access to clean water and sanitation, providing quality universal education, as well as green energy.
The SDGs aren't just a list of goals. They carry the hopes, dreams, rights and expectations of people everywhere. And they provide the surest path to living up to our obligations under the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, now in its 75th year. Yet today, only 15% of the targets are on track, and many are going in reverse. Instead of leaving no one behind, we risk leaving the SDGs behind.
UN General Assembly President Dennis Francis at the start of the summit said that despite commitments, 1.2 billion people were still living in poverty, a number he says the international community cannot accept.
The fact that we are lagging in our promise cannot be the death knell of our blueprint, nor should this summit be a forum to point fingers, apportion blame, and certainly not to accept defeat. Instead, bold and transformative actions must be prioritized to support the well-being of our global constituents, particularly those left farthest behind.
Member states were given the opportunity to engage and affirm their commitment to the development goals. China's vice president told the summit that China will continue to work with all sides to ensure the SDGs are delivered on time.
We need to promote openness and inclusiveness and oppose state coupling and severing supply chains. We need to build an open world economy and create a favorable external environment for developing countries. We need to increase the representation and voice of developing countries in global governance.
With just 7 years to go before the 2030 deadline, the UN Secretary General says the Sustainable Development Goals are woefully off track. He has warned that the slow pace of the SDGs affect developing countries the most, and the world's poorest bear the brunt of what he calls a shocking stain on humanity. Jody Jacobs, CGTN, New York.
Coming up.
We have only one world, and we have to take care of it.
UN Insider.
We are CGTN, China Global Television Network.
The United Nations provides a platform where the voices of smaller nations are heard alongside the largest global powers. I sat down with Bolivia's President Luis Arce to talk about the importance of the UN's role in a shifting global landscape. President Arce, thank you so much for joining us again. Good to see you.
Oh, thank you.
Bolivia, as we know, is a founding member of the United Nations since 1945. Talk to us about the importance of the United Nations and the importance of multilateralism, giving every nation, especially smaller ones, a voice in this world.
We joined United Nations because we agree and we are happy that everybody can have a place where we can talk and we can understand and hear each other, you know. I think it's a good place for understanding ideas and thoughts about what we have to do with as a humanity. Because we have only one world and we have to take care of it. So for me, it's very important to be in the United States, not to be out, you know. It is important to be in, to be part of the solutions, if, of course, as everybody, we are part of the problems as well. So we have to sort them out together.
Tell us more about the message that you were trying to send during your address at the UN General Assembly this year.
Well, what we think is that war, every war, any kind of war, is against all the humanity and against everybody. We have not only war in the east of Europe, but also we have between Israel and Palestine, you know, and everywhere. So what we think is that it's a moment to decorate the world as a peace zone, and that's what we have said in the assembly right now. It's not only a social problem, but also economic and a political issue that is not helping us to focus on the real problems that the humanity have to focus on. Water, poverty, inequality, and things like that, that if the wars are running, you cannot take care of these real problems that we have to focus on.
This year, there's a special focus on renewing the UN's Sustainable Development Goals. We're only 7 years away till 2030. What is on your priority list, and where do you see Bolivia right now in achieving some of your most important goals?
Well, we are developing a different kind of policy now in Bolivia. We are industrializing the country, so we need capital investments, we need technology, and that's why we have many agreements with Chinese companies, Russian companies, and many other world companies that they can come to Bolivia, industrialize the country, and sell all these things that now the world is, asking for. For example, Bolivia is the first reserves in lithium, and we understand that the world needs the lithium from Bolivia in order to sort the energy problem, the energy crisis that we are facing. So it's one of the issues that we can help as a country, but we need technology and we need capitals, money from enterprises, and we are trying to be helpful not only for ourselves but also for the world.
2023 marks the 10-year anniversary of China's Belt and Road Initiative. Bolivia is a big participant in that. I just want to get your thoughts as you look back on the past 10 years of Belt and Road and what you see for the future, especially Bolivia's part in all of that.
Yeah, we agree with the idea that China can, help all the countries to make better trades and much equal trades, I would say. I think China comes from a popular government where peoples, is in the government, and from our point of view. it's a government that takes care of people, not only education, health, and other things. That is according to our way of thinking about how a government should develop a country. So we understand perfectly the idea behind. We understand why, the strategic view of China, which, represents many countries that are trying to make a different world, more equal world, and more justice in the world as well. So that's why I think it's very important.
About a minute left, but I want to quickly ask you, very quickly, about your visit to Johannesburg and to the BRICS Summit, and your thoughts on Bolivia and your interest in possibly being a part of BRICS one day.
Well, Bolivia has a lot of things to help, a lot of things that can do in order to improve the BRICS group. We have lithium, but also we have minerals that are very demanded now. And also we are producing now food, but also we have needs. We have needs that the BRICS countries can help us to develop, to sort them out. For example, water. We need some help from technology in order to improve the watering problem in Bolivia, because we're facing, those climate change that are affecting us, and it could be a good idea to exchange ideas and experiences among countries.
President Arce, thank you for your time. We appreciate you being with us again.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Brazil is a country full of biodiversity and natural resources. Managing those resources comes with a range of challenges. I spoke with Brazil's mining minister, Alexandre Silveira, about the effort to strike a balance between progress and protection. Minister, thank you so much for joining us. When you ban mining in some areas, it seems to be just a temporary fix. How is Brazil addressing the gang activity and the illegal mining?
A questão da sustentabilidade é grande foco do nosso governo. Por isso, nós decidimos fazer a transição energética justa e inclusiva. E estamos trabalhando todas as formas de repressão à mineração, que nós não podemos chamar de mineração, na verdade, o garimpo ilegal no Brasil. Porque quando se trata de mineração, é importante a gente ser correto, se trata de empresas que são habilitadas a fazer a exploração mineral e, inclusive, tão importante a transição energética do planeta, para a gente mudar a matriz energética e, com isso, preservar a sustentabilidade e preservar a questão do clima dos nossos povos.
Do you feel that some of the goals that you have in transitioning to renewable energy will come in line with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals by 2030?
Completamente alinhado, até pelas potencialidades naturais do Brasil. Como eu disse, a nossa matriz energética de energia elétrica é 88% limpa, comparado com o mundo que tem em média 28%. Nós temos implementado políticas claras de a mais estrito respeito à questão ambiental, mas também avançarmos fortemente na descarbonização através dos biocombustíveis e na produção cada vez maior de energias limpas e renováveis, em especial fotovoltaicas e eólicas, para que nós possamos neoindustrializar o Brasil em áreas que forem estratégicas.
And we know that Brazil has a very special relationship with the United Nations. Your country always is at the top of the list during the UN General Assembly. If you can just give us a few words as to the importance and significance of the United Nations to Brazil.
Nós sabemos que esse fórum é muito importante para o planeta. Esse fórum, os líderes que fazem parte da Organização das Nações Unidas e aqueles líderes que vêm ser observadores também, a sua manifestação aqui repercute em todas as nações. Por isso, ali, o Brasil, sob a liderança do presidente Lula, ele voltou a dialogar com o mundo. Nós voltamos a dialogar, voltamos a construir incansavelmente uma busca pela paz mundial, e nós entendemos que essa paz só se vai construir com mais justiça social, com mais igualdade, com mais inclusão, com mais com a construção de uma nação, de um planeta mais limpo e mais sustentável, mas também mais justo.
Minister Alexandre Oliveira, thank you so much for joining us.
Eu é que agradeço a oportunidade e nós queremos isso, queremos dialogar com o mundo para construir a paz mundial.
Obrigada.
Coming up.
All around the world, young people are looking to their leaders for wise decisions, bold decisions.
UN Insider.
The UN's blueprint for a better global future consists of 17 sustainable development goals with a total of 169 targets. Currently, 15% of the goals are on track to be realized by 2030. Pushing for sustainable development around the world, working to eliminate poverty while also protecting the planet. That's a key mission for the UN Development Program. The agency works in 170 countries and regions and plays a key role in the effort to reach these Sustainable Development Goals. I sat down with UNDP Administrator Akeem Steiner.
Mr. Steiner, thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure to be with you.
Let's begin with the triple whammy of COVID, climate change, and conflict around the world that has erased many of the achievements against poverty alleviation. Developing countries, as we know, have been especially hit hard. So what is UNDP doing to address some of that and to also bring it back in line?
Well, you mentioned three major crises that were not really expected, certainly not in this magnitude. One that you have not explicitly mentioned is also the fiscal crisis, because on the back of the pandemic, on the back of now an economic and financial crisis and debt crisis for many countries, the biggest challenge is how do countries that have no fiscal resources left, how do they invest in coming out of this crisis? We have examined 95 countries together with their stakeholders and governments on how they are responding. Development is about moving forward. Development is about addressing poverty, but also investing in, for example, digital public infrastructure, because this is one of the greatest drivers right now of progress and recovery.
We also are seeing unprecedented climate events, wildfires, floods, fiery temperatures. We already know that 2023 will be the hottest on record. UNDP has launched an exhibit called Dear World Leaders at this year's UN General Assembly. Tell us a little bit about that and the message behind it.
You know, when the world sees leaders arrive at the United Nations, particularly for the General Assembly high-level segment in September, people think this is just a talk shop. And yes, there is a lot of talk that happens here. But it is also a moment where leaders are confronted with questions, sometimes from their counterparts in other countries, sometimes from the public. In New York, there was a major climate march yesterday. We know all around the world, young people are looking to their leaders for wise decisions, bold decisions. So the Dear World Leaders campaign is a way of bringing these voices right into the corridors. In fact, literally speaking, UNDP has an exhibit where heads of state and government are meeting, having their bilateral meetings with about 15 television screens, playing these messages from citizens across the world.
We are at this very critical moment with the Sustainable Development Goals, about halfway through. Talk about the timeline. It seems that very few of the goals are on track. And the Secretary General is calling for a renewed push to meet those SDGs 2030 right down the road.
Well, the good news is at the SDG summit in New York, actually world leaders recommitted to the goals. They have endorsed the declaration. And I think this was the first objective of bringing the world together for an SDG summit in order to reflect on whether, because of the setbacks that have been the product of a pandemic that we never planned for in 2015, or an economic and financial crisis, wars and conflicts that have happened to us as a world family since 2015, yes, we have lost momentum. We have seen setbacks, and on many goals, we have not progressed as we had hoped as a world family. So this week was a moment to say, this is half time. Are we going to do better in the second half? And are we committed to working together on this? And I think the first signal coming out of New York is an unequivocal yes.
China has put a lot of emphasis on sustainable development in programs like the Belt and Road Initiative, now celebrating 10 years. And the Global Development Initiative, how has China impacted the push to achieve the SDGs, and what can other countries learn from China?
Many people in today's world do not know that China has, over the last 30, 35 years, with its deliberate and targeted development policies, not only become an industrial power, if you want, but also lifted over 700 million people out of poverty. This is an extraordinary achievement, and I think it is one that in many developing countries is being studied today as what is it that enabled China to do that? And I think that alone is something that has also influenced the way that many developing countries now look to China as a potential partner. So when China began to invest in the Belt and Road Initiative and more recently articulated the Global Development Initiative, I think it was in the minds of many a welcome signal to invest in the development of others.
I want to touch on gender equality. Another key mandate of UNDP is gender equality. A report by UN Women in conjunction with the UNDP says, and I'm going to read you this quote, "No country has achieved full gender parity, and fewer than 1% of women and girls live in a country with high women's empowerment and a small gender gap." And further, the report says that globally, women achieve only 60% of their full potential. How do you address that?
I think UNDP has become a partner to countries where we enable countries to look at themselves through the lens of gender equality or inequality and define out of their own sense of fairness, justice, and a deep commitment to equity, that these issues need to be addressed as part of a national development process. How often does a woman not have even the basic conditions with which to walk into a bank and be able to obtain a loan, even though women are very often central to agriculture and to small, medium-scale enterprises and trade? So the emergence of digital finance, the ability of women to be able to access and transact on cell phones in order to have access to a financial system that for the better part of the last century they have often been excluded from, has revolutionized the issue of women in finance. And I think this is the challenge of our generation. Let's fast forward, let's not take excuses, and let's not take the privilege of men as an excuse to essentially deny women where their rights are unequally available to them. But more importantly, society is losing an extraordinary amount of productivity, ingenuity, leadership because of these constraints.
Mr. Achim Steiner, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks for being a UN Insider. I'm Elaine Reyes at UN headquarters in New York.